Good evening. Today is Sunday, March 8th, 2026. I'm Rich Stevens, and this is the Cold Take. What you are about to hear is news from this week, taken only from primary sources like press conferences and court documents. You can find those sources and attribution for every story at thecoldtake.com. We begin in the Middle East, where over the last 6 days the United States and Israel have conducted a coordinated military campaign against Iran. On Saturday, February 28th, the White House announced Operation Epic Fury, describing it as a U.S. military operation targeting Iran's missile forces, air defenses, and military infrastructure. The same day, the Israel Defense Forces said Israel had launched Operation Roaring Lion, striking Iranian command centers, missile systems, and air defense networks. In an official briefing, the IDF said its opening strikes killed roughly 40 senior Iranian officials, including Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. On Monday, March 2nd, U.S. Central Command said combat operations were continuing and confirmed 6 U.S. service members had been killed in action. By March 4th, the White House said Iranian ballistic missile launches had fallen 86% from the first day of fighting, and one-way drone launches had dropped 73%. The statement said U.S. and Israeli forces were continuing strikes against missile launch sites and military targets across Iran. On March 6th, the IDF Chief of Staff said Israeli forces had carried out about 2,500 strikes using more than 6,000 munitions since the operation began. Thursday, March 5th, Admiral Brad Cooper spoke alongside Secretary of War Pete Hegseth in Tampa. The CENTCOM commander said U.S. forces have sunk or destroyed more than 30 Iranian naval vessels during Operation Epic Fury. He added that U.S. forces struck an Iranian drone carrier roughly the size of a World War II aircraft carrier, leaving the vessel on fire. The admiral added U.S. bombers struck nearly 200 targets inside Iran in the previous 72 hours, including ballistic missile launchers and Iran's Space Command infrastructure. He said missile and drone attacks had dropped sharply since the start of the operation. Officials noted the next phase will target Iran's ballistic missile production capability. You can watch the whole press conference at thecoldtake.com. On Sunday, March 1st, Hezbollah launched projectiles from Lebanon towards northern Israel. The Israel Defense Forces said it responded by striking Hezbollah targets across Lebanon. Lebanon's cabinet then announced an immediate ban on Hezbollah military activity and ordered its weapons restricted to the Lebanese state. President Joseph Aoun and Prime Minister Nawaf Salam also condemned the rocket fire and said decisions on war and peace belong to the government. In a public post, U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee said Hezbollah had given Israel an opportunity to test the Iron Beam air defense system. A video shows rockets being destroyed almost immediately after launch, and you can see it at thecoldtake.com. Also Sunday, March 1st, 3 U.S. Air Force F-15E Strike Eagles were shot down over Kuwait in what U.S. Central Command described as an apparent friendly fire incident. CENTCOM says the aircraft were supporting Operation Epic Fury when Kuwaiti air defense systems mistakenly engaged them. All 6 crew members ejected safely, were recovered, and were reported to be in stable condition. CENTCOM said Kuwait acknowledged the incident and is cooperating to investigate the cause. Moving to current events, on Sunday, March 1st, a man wearing a sweatshirt reading, quote, "Property of Allah," opened fire outside a bar on West 6th Street in Austin, Texas. Austin police say a black Cadillac SUV pulled alongside Buford's backyard beer garden, and the driver fired a pistol into the crowd. The suspect then drove down the street, parked, exited the vehicle with a rifle, and fired at a pedestrian while moving back towards the bar area. Officers located the suspect, who then fired in the direction of officers. 3 officers returned fire, struck the suspect, and took him into custody. The shooter was identified as 53-year-old Ndaga Diagne, who was pronounced dead at the scene. Austin police say 19 people sustained injuries in the incident. 21-year-old Savatha Shawn and 19-year-old Ryder Harrington were pronounced dead at the scene. 30-year-old Jorge Peterson was later pronounced deceased at the hospital. The FBI and Austin police say the investigation into the attack is ongoing. On Sunday, March 1st, Virginia State Police responded to a road rage incident on I-495 in Fairfax County that led to a stabbing attack. Police say Jared Lamato, 32, of McLean, stabbed 4 women, killing Michelle Adams, 39, seriously injuring 3 others, and killing a dog. A Virginia State Police trooper shot Lamato, who later succumbed to his wounds at the hospital. Killing a dog. Wednesday, March 4th, Tim Tebow testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee on Crime and Counterterrorism. He spoke to advocate for the Renewed Hope Act of 2026, a bill to combat child exploitation. During his testimony, he showed a map of the United States identifying 6 months' worth of known cases of downloading, sharing, or distribution of child abuse images. The map shows over 330 instances in 6 months. I've mentioned this before when I spoke about Roblox and Minecraft, but Friday, the Florida legislature held a hearing about it, and earlier in the week, 89 people were arrested in Tampa. The Sean Ryan podcast has almost 6 million subscribers on YouTube, and he has more than 12 hours of content devoted to protecting kids online. If you are a parent, please take this seriously. Visit thecoldtake.com. I built a page that's a permanent link in the header titled Parental Resources, and it has links to information about how to protect your kids, tools to monitor their devices, and details about how these sickos groom children. I have no affiliation with any of these people or tools. I don't get a penny from it, but I'm a parent and these stories make me sick. So if you're a parent, go to the website. I have videos, links, and a few of my own thoughts as well. In Tampa, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office announced March 3rd that 89 people were arrested in an undercover operation targeting people seeking to exploit children and purchase. The operation ran during the first 5 weeks of 2026 and resulted in 1,217 felony charges. The operation rescued 2 minors, including a 2-year-old child recovered from an exploitation case and a missing 17-year-old girl who investigators say was being commercially exploited. Authorities arrested Peter Torres, 42, in connection with the toddler's case, and Armani Hopkins, 23, in connection with the case involving the missing teenager. In December 2025, a federal district court in California issued a permanent injunction in Mirabelli v. Bonta, blocking enforcement of policies that allow schools to withhold information from parents when a student adopts a different gender identity at school. The state of California appealed, and in January 2026, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit granted a stay, pausing the district court's injunction while the appeal proceeds. The plaintiffs then filed an emergency application with the U.S. Supreme Court, citing the 14th Amendment. On March 2, 2026, the U.S. Supreme Court vacated the Ninth Circuit stay as it applies to the parental plaintiffs, which allows the district court injunction to take effect for them while the case continues. California's Department of Justice asserted that under state law, schools are not required to disclose a student's gender identity to parents, and that guidance is intended to protect student privacy and safety. The Ninth Circuit appeal is still pending, and the case could return to the Supreme Court for a final ruling. On Wednesday, March 4th, the Supreme Court issued a unanimous decision in Urias Orellana v. Bondi involving an asylum claim. The court held that federal appellate courts reviewing asylum denials must defer to the factual findings of immigration judgments and the Board of Immigration Appeals unless the evidence compels a different conclusion. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson stated that under federal immigration law, quote, "The agency's findings of fact are conclusive unless any reasonable adjudicator would be compelled to conclude to the contrary." The ruling affirms that immigration courts and not federal appellate courts are the primary fact finders in asylum cases. Sticking with the Supreme Court but moving into more political stories, in New York, a state trial court ordered the state to redraw the boundaries of the 11th Congressional District, which covers Staten Island and parts of Brooklyn. The judge ruled the district diluted the voting power of Black and Hispanic voters and directed the state to create a new map before the next election. The district's current representative, Republican Nicole Malatokis, and other plaintiffs appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, arguing the ruling would force the state to redraw the district using race as a primary factor. On March 2nd, the Supreme Court issued an emergency order blocking the redraw for now, allowing the current district map to remain in place while the case continues through the appeals process. For the moment, New York cannot change the district lines. The underlying case will now continue in the lower courts, where judges will determine whether the state's redistricting order complies with federal constitutional standards. On Thursday, March 5th, President Donald Trump announced on Truth Social that he was removing Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and nominating Senator Markwayne Mullin to lead DHS. Trump wrote that Noem has, quote, served us well, and said she would move to a new role as the special envoy to the Shield of the Americas. 2 days earlier, Noem testified before Congress during a hearing on DHS operations. Following the testimony, lawmakers from both parties publicly criticized the department and its leadership. Senator John Fetterman wrote that DHS was in crisis and called for changes to leadership. Representative Maxwell Frost wrote that Noem will, quote, go down in history as a bigot, while also stating that removing her would not solve the broader problems at DHS. Homeland Committee Republicans focused on the funding dispute, posting that Democrats continue to block the DHS funding bill. House Speaker Mike Johnson also posted that Democrats were keeping the Department of Homeland Security closed during ongoing funding standoffs. The partial government shutdown enters day 14 with no end in sight. Former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton both testified before Congress this week as part of the House Oversight Committee's investigation related to Jeffrey Epstein. The committee released the recordings of the depositions, totaling roughly 9 hours of testimony between the two sessions. There is no official transcript available yet, but we will put out a special edition once we've reviewed the complete testimony. Smash that follow button to get notified when that video is available. On Sunday, February 23rd, Fairfax County Police say 32-year-old Abdul Jola fatally stabbed 41-year-old Stephanie Minter at a bus stop in Fairfax County. Police say officers first arrested Jola on February 24th in connection with a petty larceny before identifying him as the last person seen with Minter. He was then charged with second-degree murder and is being held without bond. Weeks before the killing, Governor Abigail Spanberger rescinded a prior executive order that had directed Virginia law enforcement to assist with federal immigration enforcement. Her order directs state and local law enforcement to focus on enforcing Virginia law rather than federal immigration law. On February 4th, she also directed several state agencies to terminate all Section 287G agreements with ICE, while saying Virginia officers may still act when presented with a valid judicial warrant. In response, the Department of Homeland Security said Jola is an illegal alien with more than 30 prior arrests and urged Virginia authorities not to release him. DHS said ICE uses immigration detainers to request notification of transfer of custody, but judicial warrants cannot be obtained without federal charges. In Kansas, a new law affecting state identification documents took effect this week. The legislation is a House substitute for Senate Bill 244. According to the official bill text, the law defines gender in Kansas as biological sex assigned at birth and directs the state's Division of Vehicles and Office of Vital Statistics to invalidate and reissue driver licenses and birth certificates when the sex designation does not match that definition. Kansas Governor Laura Kelly vetoed the bill February 13th, saying in her message that the legislation would have numerous and significant consequences. The legislature then overrode the veto, and the statute took effect February 26th. That same day, 2 Kansas residents filed a lawsuit in Douglas County District Court seeking to block enforcement of the law, arguing it violates protections in the Kansas Constitution, including equal protection and due process. The case is currently pending and no ruling has been issued. On Monday, March 2nd, Florida Attorney General James Uthmire announced his office is reviewing whether the city of Jacksonville violated Florida law by maintaining a firearm registry. In a letter to Melissa Nelson, Uthmire said Jacksonville kept logbooks recording the names and firearm information of people entering city buildings while armed. Nelson's office investigated the logs and declined criminal charges, concluding the conduct did not meet the statute's requirement that violations be, quote, knowing and willful. Uthmeyer rejected that conclusion and directed his office to obtain the investigative evidence and evaluate whether to pursue civil enforcement under Florida Statute 790.335, which bans government firearm registries. The statute allows civil penalties of up to $5 million if a court finds a local government knowingly maintained a registry of privately owned firearms or firearm owners. Markets turned red this week. The Dow Jones dropped 1,476 points, a 3% loss, closing at 47,501. This erases 15 weeks of gain going back to late November. NASDAQ lost 282 points and closed at 22,386. The S&P 500 lost 2%, a drop of 138 points, finishing the week at 6,740. Gold futures also fell this week, ending trading at $5,158 an ounce, a 2.6% drop. Meanwhile, crude oil futures rose by 28%, gaining nearly $20 and closing 10 cents shy of $100. Moving to sports, on Wednesday, March 4th, Louis Leo Holtz, who went by Lou, passed away at his home in Orlando, Florida. Born in West Virginia in 1937, Lou attended Kent State, where he played football and trained in the Army Reserve Officers Training Corps. After earning a bachelor's degree in history, Holtz got his master's at University of Iowa. From there, his focus was football. His coaching career included William & Mary, NC State, the New York Jets, Arkansas, Minnesota, Notre Dame, and South Carolina. He led the Fighting Irish to a national championship in 1988 and was later awarded an honorary doctorate from Notre Dame. Holtz was elected to the College Football Hall of Fame, the Arkansas Sports Hall of Fame, the Cotton Bowl Hall of Fame, and in 2020, President Trump awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Lou Holtz was 89 years old. In the Formula One Australian Grand Prix, the opening race of the 2026 season, local hero Oscar Piastri crashed on the formation lap and didn't even start the race. Leclerc took the lead in turn 1 from 4th on the grid. The Red Bull of Isaac Hadjar suffered a failure that saw him retire the car after just 11 laps. Mercedes and Ferrari split strategies and traded places in the front throughout the race, with the Mercedes of George Russell eventually coming home in first. Max Verstappen started 20th but finished 6th behind defending world champion Lando Norris. In college basketball, Sunday, March 1st, unranked Ohio State beat 8th-ranked Purdue 82-74. On Tuesday, unranked UCLA beat 9th-ranked Nebraska 72-52. Other unranked winners were Arizona State over number 14 Kansas and Georgia over number 16 Alabama. The 5th-ranked national championship defending Florida Gators sealed the SEC regular season championship with a 108-74 win over Mississippi State, and Miami of Ohio beat Toledo 74-72 to stay perfect at 30-0. They needed overtime Friday against Ohio to cap a perfect 31-0 regular season in a 110-108 win, and congratulations to that squad. Saturday, March 7th, 4th-ranked UConn fell to unranked Marquette 68-62. Unranked Wisconsin beat 15th-ranked Purdue 97-93. Florida went into Rupp Arena and beat Kentucky 84-77. The Gators are the number 1 seed in the SEC tournament, and with UConn's loss, bracketologists have them now at a number 1 seed in the big tournament as well. And finally, Saturday, February 28th, a Cameron Z-77 hot air balloon struck the guide wire of a radio tower around 8:40 a.m. with 2 people on board. According to the FAA, the balloon became entangled near the top of the tower in Longview, Texas, more than 900 feet above the ground. Longview Fire Department crews conducted a high-angle rescue and lowered both occupants to the ground. Both were transported to a hospital as a precaution. The FAA is investigating the incident. I have always thought it would be cool to fly a hot air balloon, but I never considered the possibility of being stuck at the top of a radio tower. I'm also really curious how they got the basket down. If you have that video, send it to us. And like it or not, that's what happened. I'm Rich Stevens, and this has been The Cold Take.